So the reason Trent decided to get the vaccine, one of his professors gave a speech one day in class, and it was kind of along the lines of, get the vaccine for the good of others. He was, very athletic, very fit.
Yeah.
So no health issues.
No health issues. I told him that we were not in support of the vaccine. We thought it had been rolled out too quickly, that there wasn't enough research done on it.
It did seem a little weird how fast everything got rolled out. It felt like more of a control device than anything. His death certificate says that cause of death was anoxic brain injury caused by cardiac arrest, caused by
COVID vaccination.
I just miss him. Never miss an opportunity. Be thankful for what's there. Be thankful for the opportunity to be, to have children, to love your children.
Welcome to the React 19 podcast, where we bring awareness and support to the COVID-19 vaccine injured and discuss the science, research, and laws that affect all of us. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Ann Forty with the React 19 podcast, and today my guests are the parents of Trent Lieffring, Kimberly, and Andy. Their son received 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine and tragically died in August of 2023. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, one of the main goals of React 19 has been to bring awareness to all those who've been injured by the COVID vaccines, hoping that the injured can be acknowledged and helped. However, for those whose loved one has died, that hope is no longer possible. And this is why it is so important for those who have lost a loved one to have an opportunity to share with others the life that once shone so brightly in this world, in the hope that life can be etched in the minds of others and perhaps bring a little more clarity into this world for all of us. So Andy and Kimberly, we just would like to have you to have the opportunity today to share about your beloved son, what he was like, his journey on why he decided to get the shot, and the journey that you had to go on after he became very ill, and now how you're getting through your days. So I open up the mic to you, and just please tell us about Trent, and whoever would like to start.
In describing Trent, he's a very kind, loyal, hardworking, joyful, sweet soul.
Yeah.
I have 4 children, and Trent by far was my easiest. He was so easy to raise. He was such a good, sweet child, and continued. He was a yes, sir, yes, ma'am, kind of kid, and not because we required that. That's just the kind of kid he was. So yeah, he just a very, very sweet, kind, joyful soul.
Mm-hmm. I would add that he was also very what would be the word? Mature in his ability to relate, even as a very young man. He knew how to relate, not just in a respectful way, but knew how to talk to adults, knew how to be a very obedient son. And I don't mean that in a way that he understood from a very young age that, you know what, if I listen to my mom and dad, it's going to go well for me.
I think in the interview I watched of you, I think it was you, Andy, that said it was an honor to be his parent, and that's, that really summarizes so much. Yeah. So what was it that led him through? What was your feeling about the COVID vaccine? What led him to get the vaccine? Walk us through that.
Okay. So the reason Trent decided to get the vaccine was because at the time he was attending a state school in Nashville for college, and one of his professors gave a speech one day in class, and it was kind of along the lines of, get the vaccine for the good of others. He was 23. He was, very athletic, very fit.
Yeah.
He didn't necessarily need it
So
himself.
no health issues.
No health issues. Absolutely none. In very good athletic shape, worked out, but he really took to heart the speech that the professor gave. And I do remember him asking my advice on it. And I told him that we were not in support of the vaccine. We thought it had been rolled out too quickly, that there wasn't enough research done on it. It felt so rushed that it just didn't feel right for us. And we counseled him, meaning me and my partner at the time, and to not get it. And Andy, I don't know if he spoke with you about it, but that's the counsel we gave him.
Sure. He actually did come to me, and I didn't. In retrospect, I wish I would have been a little more adamant about it. I understood why people were getting it at the time, without maybe fully being able to grasp the, potential ramifications. I'm with Kimberly. It did seem a little weird how fast everything got rolled out. Probably should have gone with my instincts. It felt like more of a control device than anything. But I understood why people were getting the vaccine. My elderly folks were, they were very early in their desire to accept it, just simply because they wanted to resume normal life. And I told him that, I'm not going to be doing it for myself, but I do understand if that's what you want to do. Of course, never thinking that
Right.
my perfectly healthy son would be affected by it.
And it just kind of shows his heart, where you talked about how kind he was and considerate of others, that he really thought he was doing this for the greater good.
Right.
And again, not knowing, because obviously of all the censorship and everything that was going on, not really ever having informed consent. So he takes the vaccine, and what happens?
He took the first vaccine, and maybe a month or so ago, I was scrolling through my text messages, and I was going through my thread with Trent, and I ran across a text that I had sent him. And this was in between his first and second shot, and the boosters were starting to come out. And I didn't know, if he had taken the first and second shot or just the first. But what I did say to him was, in this text thread, I said, Trent, don't take any of the boosters.
Right.
I didn't feel they were safe. And he responded and he said, okay, I won't, but I have to get the second shot. And then the thread just ended. Like, I don't know if we picked it up on phone or if we just dropped it, but he did go ahead and get the second shot, maybe 2.5, 3 months after the first, both of them being Pfizer. And, I think after the second one, he just kind of felt like he had a bad headache, little, not himself for a day, but everything was fine until months later, when he woke up and went into cardiac arrest.
Just out of the blue.
Completely out of the blue. Yeah. I think, Andy, you can tell what was happening the night before, when he was leaving work.
Yeah, I don't believe he was feeling well that night at work. He worked as a valet downtown Nashville, parking cars and such. And he got home from work around 11:30, and he just wasn't feeling well. But just, wrote it off as, I'm not feeling well, I'm feeling sick. Well, he, I guess, was very restless through the night. According to his fiance, he was very restless through the night, and very feverish. And they woke up in the morning. She felt him, and he was very feverish, and she said, okay, I'm gonna go get you a COVID test, just to make sure, see what we're dealing with here. She got up, went to the bathroom to start getting ready, and the bathroom was right off of their bedroom, and I guess he was saying something to her. I think he was saying, Maya, I think I need help. And she could hear it in his voice that he was he was passing out, and he went into cardiac arrest on the bed, and she called 911 and, you know, did her best to do what she needed to do during that time. 911 was there very quickly, and took them a long time to get him revived, to the point where he had lost so much oxygen to his brain, and there was extensive brain damage that just, you know, it was so much that he never came back from the vegetative state that it led him into.
That must have been so difficult, because that happens, but he actually doesn't pass away until a year later. So walk us through that year and how that journey went and what you went through.
Well, unfortunately, Trent didn't have insurance at the time. We'll start there. He had insurance every other year of his life, and he decided to forego it that year for whatever reason. We weren't quite sure, but he said, I'll just pick it up next year. So it was a nightmare as far as getting the kind of care that we felt would be really good quality.
So hard.
You know, when we were in the ICU unit, which we were in there, what, Andy, a month longer? I don't know, 6 weeks.
He was in the hospital a month. He was in ICU about 3 weeks.
Okay. So he's in this vegetative state, and, you know, vented, and he's having these spastic, you know, when you have an anoxic brain injury, especially to the level that Trent had, it messes up all the functions in your body, you know? And so, you know, you're having these spasticities, these rigid, you know, what?
Severe muscle contractions.
Yeah, severe muscle contractions. He's biting his lip to where it's just huge. And when we're trying to figure out why this happened, you know, they can't find anything wrong with him. You know, there's no heart condition, there's no other underlying medical issues. So when we decide to bring up the option is this from the vaccine? Because you can't find anything else wrong with our son. He goes into cardiac arrest at 23. Is this from the vaccine? And it's crickets when you're in the hospital, and when you're in the ICU. They don't say yes, they don't say no, they say nothing. It wasn't until we got further away from the hospital, like in the nursing home or in the rehabilitative centers, that you had doctors speaking more openly about it. And so after Trent left the hospital, we went to a nursing home, and Andy, I'll let you pick up the story from there.
Yeah, he was we were Medicaid pending. For the first 3 months of the ordeal, we were Medicaid pending. So when the hospital does what they can do to keep, you know, to get him stable, they moved him out to the first, you know, state-run facility that they could find, and it was a understaffed, underfunded state-run facility, nursing home facility that was just a few miles from the hospital. I wanted to take our son home. We wanted to do that from the get-go, but without insurance, it meant he wasn't under the care of a doctor. So without being under the care of a doctor, you couldn't get medications and stuff like that, all the different prescriptions that he needed. So he had to go to this crappy nursing home facility, and hospital was very, very abrupt in their discontinuing their care. They were very abrupt. It was at about 4:30 one Friday afternoon. The nurse came in and told me we were being discharged in about 15 minutes. Get everything ready.
Wow.
The ambulance will be here. So I did, and I got there just ahead of the ambulance, and went to the room, and they wheeled my son in, and I kind of freaked out. I said, we're not staying here. You're not putting my son here. He is not going to stay here. You put him back in that ambulance and we're going back to the hospital. And ambulance drivers were like, sir, we'll take you wherever you want to go. I understand there's going to be a fee assessed, but we will go wherever you want us to. And I mean, going back to the hospital wasn't an option. They weren't going to take us back, but all I could think was I want to take him home, and they wouldn't let us. And I said, well, the one nurse kind of calmed me down. She just said, sir, we're going to take good care of your son. And I said, okay, I'm staying here. I'm not leaving him. So I slept on the floor that night by his side, and got a little more used to the staff in the following days. And there was some good people there. There was, as crappy a facility as it was, there was some good people there. Everybody was overworked. But we made a go of it. For 3 months he was there, and we were basically splitting shifts during the day. I mean, this is how we rolled. I'd get there about 8 o'clock in the morning, and she would come sometime during the afternoon and stay till about 8 o'clock at night. And between the two of us, we were there between 10, 11, and 12, sometimes more hours per day. And I know they got to the point where they hated us for it, because we were always by his side, and we were always making badger them and make sure he was getting what he needed. And he was getting bathed regularly and changed regularly. We would take pictures of him at night to make sure that, okay, this is how I left him. If he looks like that in the morning, there's a problem.
Because they needed to rotate him every couple hours.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think he was getting the full extent of the care he needed. I don't think anybody was there. But anyway, during that time, he had a couple different short stays at the hospital, a couple different emergency room visits, and the last one was would have been early December. He I forget even what it was that he went back there for. He was sick in some way, but when I was admitting him, I just said, he's going to be Medicaid pending, so whatever. And the admitting lady was like, she's looking on her computer, and she's like, no, he's actually Medicaid approved. Here's your number. I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, so he was there at the hospital for, a few days, and they got him, everything was fine. And that the hospitalist, I explained to him that, we need the care of a doctor so I can take my son home. And, or we can take our son home. And the doctor, that hospitalist, was awesome. He was trying to just kind of kick the can down the road a little, buy us enough time where he wouldn't discharge back to this hospital, back to the nursing home again. Well, then the caseworker or whatever, she came to us the one day and she said, I'm sorry, you might have to wait a little bit longer. And I threw another fit. I was like, you know what, I'm not okay with this. You find me a doctor so I can take my son home. I am not taking him back to that nursing home. I'm not okay with this. And lo and behold, I get a call the next morning. Said Monday morning, Dr. Parker will be at your residence. And so December the 16th of 22, we were able to bring our son home and start taking care of him from home.
Now, I'm curious, what was it? I mean, did you believe he was going to get better in time? I mean, when you knew he had so much brain damage and what had happened, what were your thoughts at that time? Obviously any parent is thinking there's a chance. And is that what it was, that you just felt that there was a chance?
So when someone has an anoxic brain injury like Trent did, and it puts them in a vegetative state, they don't consider you to be in a permanent one until a year. There are a lot of cases where someone will come out of it, depending on the level of damage to their brain, months later, 6, 7, 8 months later, that happens. And I think in the beginning, there were certain signs that, we thought, well, maybe he's still in there, if he tracked you in the room, or when he obviously, in the state he was in, could still respond to touch and sound. But, they showed us the MRIs. There was brain damage on every lobe in every area. It was quite extensive. And so we thought, okay, well, we've got to give this a year. As time went on and more things were going wrong with Trent, and we could see that he was suffering, Andy and I, and it takes a while as a parent to get to that place, where you say, okay, this is enough. And, you bring hospice in. And that doesn't just happen like that,
Right.
It's a process. So do you want to add anything?
Well, I was going to say, at first it was kind of our thought, our collective, decision to give him, to think, okay, let's do this, a year and a half. We thought, okay, a year is what they're telling us. Let's see what we got after a year and a half. And it became, I think it came to both of us relatively at the same time, but I came to her, I remember it was Father's Day weekend. And I remember coming to you and saying, I think we should look at this at a year. I just think he's suffering. And, it became just difficult to see our son suffer. And part of it too is, he was so medicated that a lot of it was because of the severe muscle contractions. He was so medicated, it was hard to even uncover, okay, was there some form of connection that could be made? It was even questioned at one point in his rehab process. Some of the doctors even thought, well, maybe he's not in a vegetative state, maybe he's I forget what they called it, but between vegetative and, pre-conscious or whatever. It was splitting hairs. But what we're trying to say is there were some encouraging signs along the way. It was just, with those encouraging signs, you were also watching him suffer a great deal. And so at a year, Kimberly and I decided at a year we would talk about what we have to do in terms of hospice.
I just can't imagine that. I just can't imagine having to make that decision. So you make that decision. So what does that entail? Okay. I mean, so is it a matter of taking him off machines? It is a matter of taking him, food and water. What happens?
In Trent's case, he was breathing on his own. So there is no, machines as far as that goes. And yes, to your point, you do take away food and water. And we sat with that for months. And in the beginning, I'll speak for myself, it horrified me to think about removing food or water from my child. And as it turns out, when that time came and we made that decision and hospice came in, and, we did this all at home. We wanted to be at home or with family around. When the body is shutting down, it actually doesn't want food or water. It actually can quite complicate things and make the person, can cause distress and uncomfortableness in other ways. It was the most peaceful experience and the most comfort. And Andy, you can tell me if you agree that we saw our son in since this whole thing happened.
Wow.
So it actually isn't so. It sounds horrific, but it actually isn't in practice, or not in practice, in reality.
Wow.
He was very peaceful, versus leading up to that. When we talk about him suffering, this rigidity that he would have, these muscle spasms and rigidity, his legs were turned in and they looked like hockey sticks. and they were so rigid. You'd have to like just pull it, and his hands, to get them to uncurl.
Wow.
And the pressure he was putting on his joints. And, it was excruciating. It looked excruciating,
Yeah.
Gosh, that just,
So
I just can't fathom what that year took out of you. Like,
I mean, Andy was losing, he was so stressed out. He was literally losing his fingernails. Literally, I don't know what the condition was, Andy. It was caused by the stress.
Yeah, some sort of dermatitis on my hands because of, stress related. It took every ounce of physical and emotional energy. Bad,
how did your children deal with it?
Andy and I are exes. We've been exes for a very long time.
Okay.
So we moved in together to take care of Trent. And our daughter, who's 21, was also living with us. So it's us three and Trent. And he has an older brother who is 27, who lived nearby, but, not with us. And, I think that it was very surreal for them as well. It's even now, sometimes it feels like, did this really happen? Like,
Yeah, no,
I
I understand.
Yeah. And so I think that they also were in that process and still are to some degree.
Now, your family, friends, did they believe this was from the vaccine? I mean, were you getting any pushback? I mean, and with the doctors, and what was his death classified as? Can you shed some light on this?
His death certificate says that cause of death was anoxic brain injury caused by cardiac arrest, caused by COVID
vaccination.
That is remarkable. I mean, given how much that I have worked with the COVID vaccine injured and bereaved, that is remarkable to me that they actually acknowledge that.
Yeah,
they did.
Our amazing hospice nurses. We did not ask for that. It's not something we asked for. We didn't request it. It was just through discussions with to an individual. Each nurse that came in, every doctor that came in, they all either would outright agree with you, or they would kind of nod and, we understand, we get you, we've seen this, is kind of what you would that was the overall sentiment that we were getting from them. And when it came down to it, that's what they did, without even Kimberly and I were both very surprised when we got our copies of the death certificate. Like, oh my gosh, this is on here.
I got chills. I did not expect that, and as far as family and friends, I think it's divided. I think that some believe it, some don't. I think a lot of people who actually got the vaccination themselves, several of them, it's really hard to accept that might be the reason that this happened, because they also have the vaccine. And some of them just may not believe it, period. I get the sense, from different friends or family that don't say much, that they don't think it is. And then there are other friends and family that absolutely voice and think that it is. So
same here.
I have to say, I thought of you today because recently I spoke at our our county's public health meetings. They have meetings every 3 months, and you have to be approved to make a comment, and then you have 3 minutes. And I commented because I try to bring awareness in the community, whether it's a county commissioners meeting or elected officials. And so at that meeting, I talked about the importance of informed consent, and that the community was not receiving proper informed consent on the COVID vaccine, and that they really had a responsibility, a moral and ethical responsibility, to let people know. And, I certainly could provide them the evidence and, obviously the work I do with React 19. And at that meeting, the doctor who was leading it up said, well, we really can only say what the government tells us to say. And, you know, you'd really have to pass a law for us to be able to do that. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me that you do have this responsibility to tell people this. And again, he just said, well, we have to do what the government says. And anyway, so yesterday I called the Department of Health and said, so I asked the person there, I said, can you tell me who the doctor was that spoke that night? Because I didn't know. I know the one who's usually there, but he was on vacation. And this person told me it. And I said, well, I just want to be clear on what he said, because I'm also working with our local senator on different legislation. And so she said, well, I can't give you his number, but I can give him your number. And I'm like, that's fine. So he calls me last night and he said, basically the same, well, we have to do what the government says so we can get our government stuff and free vaccines and whatever. I was just like, wait, you know, and I was really clear. I didn't want him to think I was pointing a finger at him. I'm like, but as doctors, you have a moral and ethical responsibility when you know this is happening. And he said, this conversation is over. And he basically hung up on me. He just said goodbye. And so I was like, okay. So then I wrote a letter last night, right after that, to the head of the Board of Health and the person I talked to. And I said, this is very unfortunate, you know, that this is the way that you're communicating with us. Anyway, this morning, another doctor calls me and he basically says the same thing. And I'm like, you know, and I said, but you know, this is causing this. And I said, I'm interviewing parents tonight who lost their child to the vaccine. And he's like, well, so they believe. And I wanted to be like,
Yeah.
I mean, right there. And I was just, and so I'm fighting, and I'm going to continue. I talked to our senator after that conversation, and again, our senator is also a doctor, and so I'm pursuing this because what I don't. How do you view the medical community? How do you have any sense? I mean, are you just more like, you know, this has happened and we want to move on? Where are you at with what's happened? Do you have any desire to sue? Do you have any? I mean, I don't mean sue, but just maybe part of other lawsuits that are, you know, part of Pfizer not being honest. And where are you in all this mix?
Can I answer first, Andy? Is that okay?
Yes.
So there's two things I'd like to share. I want to back up to the question about, you know, whether or not, you know, Trent's death was from the vaccine or not. You know, I've been in a lot of chat rooms, and I consistently see this when it's put out there that maybe someone has been injured or been killed by this vaccine. You'll hear individuals say, show me the study that links this to, you know, cardiac arrest, or show me the study. Well, the fact of the matter is we are the study. You know, normally you have, 8 to 12 years of research on a vaccine before it's released. You know, that did not happen. So we are the study. I can't show you anything because it's unfolding in real time, you know? So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Second is, yes, we just found out yesterday, Andy and I had a conversation with a organization that is, you know, trying to support those who have been injured or bereaved by the vaccine, or this vaccine and others. And unfortunately for Trent's case, we are approaching in 2 weeks the statute of limitations. Trent will have passed away a year in 2 weeks. And in certain states, we've already gone over that, because some of the statutes say that you had to put in some kind of lawsuit within a year of when they took the vaccine. And then some of them will say, well, they'll push that out to a year from when the individual passed away. We weren't connected to this organization until just a few months ago. And there's not enough time to find, you know, representation, to put everything together, to put a lawsuit out. And so what that means is in 2 weeks, we can never sue them for anything. You know, there's a few other avenues that they can maybe possibly go down, but it's never going to be now. You know, if we had, and honestly, you know, Andy and I, first of all, we just went through a year of hell, and then we're grieving and figuring out how to pick up the pieces and what we're going to do with our lives now and moving forward. Thinking about what the statute was to bring a lawsuit against Pfizer or anybody else was not on our minds, you know. And this organization kind of fell in our lap, but it's not enough time to put it together.
Right. Yeah. As far as lawsuit type stuff, I mean, any kind of justice. I mean, yes, I you want justice, right? We're never going to mete out the proper amount of justice for these people. They will all answer to a holy God, and that to me is the most fearful thing. So it's not mine to handle. If in the meantime we can get the word out like we're doing right now,
right,
that's the good that comes from it.
right.
No amount of money, no amount of people in jail or whatever is going to bring our son back. As far as the medical community, I mean, I don't trust obviously the pharmaceutical, industry at all. The government, I do believe, has used this as a tool for control and fear. But the medical community, I mean, it's created a bunch of mistrust because there is a bunch of not knowing. I mean, there's good, honest people who don't even know the truth,
Right.
anymore. And so you don't know who you can trust. You don't know what information is trustworthy. And it starts to look, very quickly, it starts to look like a huge money-making scheme for big pharma. And it doesn't matter what, how many lives or what kind of wake of destruction they leave. That's what it is. So no, I mean, as far as medicine in general, I don't trust it at all. I probably never will again. Even though I do know there are good, honest doctors and nurses working to do their best. But the system is clearly broken, but it's also clearly perverted.
Right. So what would you say, and maybe you've already, said it, I'm not sure, like what are the major lessons that you've learned through all of this? Like walking through the last year, what have been those things that maybe you didn't know before or that you view now differently than you did before?
I mean, mine are going to be very personal, so I'm not sure if you're referring to around the medical community again and the vaccine, or
anything, just anything that you feel might be that you would want to share or that you might think benefit someone listening.
I think this goes far beyond, far beyond why my son, passed away. But for me, it's been a big lesson in importance of where I put my time and energy and what I value.
Right.
I have my own personal experience. Before this happened to Trent, I was putting my energy and my attention in things that I would never do now. And I think that I even have some regret. I never thought that I would lose Trent at such a young age, and whereas he really connected with Andy on sports and Trent was a big sports guy. He wanted to be a sports announcer. And I'm not interested in sports. And so I kind of was waiting for Trent to have his family and connect in other ways. And so I feel like I didn't give him the attention that had I known, I definitely would have found other ways to connect with him and not been so consumed with the other things that I was consumed with.
Right.
And so moving forward, it's taught me to that time is my most precious thing, and where I put my attention and my time absolutely matters. So I feel like I paid a really big price in learning that lesson through Trent passing. And there's so much more I've learned from this, but that is a big thing that I carry with me now.
Well, and those are good things. Yes, I agree. They can happen, you know, a little later than what we would have wanted, but moving forward, it gives you the perspective of, you know, what's in front of us now. So how about you, Andy?
A lot of things, I think, you know, lessons, that stuff that you know, but that gets driven home. Our lives are not our own, you know. Never miss an opportunity to tell somebody you love them. Never miss an opportunity to laugh with them if you can. I just miss him. But never miss an opportunity. Be thankful for what's there. Be thankful for the opportunity to be, you know, to have children, to love your children, to remember that the 24 years we had with him. And the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. So to be able to come to terms with it, as much as I want to play God, I'm not God. And he is the life giver. And it's his right to take away when he wants to. I believe that our son was here for the exact amount of time ordained by God. Which is why it's so important, you know, kind of playing off of what Kimberly just said and what I said, to not miss an opportunity. You don't know how much time you have.
Could I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I just want to say this one thing about Trent, because you know, you started this interview off asking, you know, or curious about Trent.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'll add to that and maybe end with is that Trent was always a fighter. He reminded me, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Rudy, who's kind of the underdog.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't have, like, you know, Rudy was interested in football, but he wasn't like naturally talented at it. But because of his perseverance and his hard work and his discipline, he excelled and he was a fighter. And that really embodies Trent. That's just the spirit he had. Even when he was going through the year of hell before he passed, and we would talk about that, Andy. We would say, gosh, you know, he's such a fighter. You know, he has a really strong spirit. And I really admired that about him, you know, because just because he wasn't naturally talented at something didn't deter him from going for it if he wanted it. So you know, that is something that is a really admirable trait and an admirable thing to possess. And it was all the way to the end like that.
Wow.
Yeah, to illustrate that, his junior year, Trent was in track and he was a sprinter. And he was injured a lot his junior year. And his track coach told him that he believes that next year, his senior year, Trent should look at running more distance events. And Trent told him, no, I'm a sprinter. And Trent was about, what was he, Kim? About 5'6", 5'7"?
Oh, no, 5'7", 5'8", Andy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll settle on 5'7".
Okay.
about 130 pounds of lean muscle. And, for a short white boy, he could flat out fly because he trained himself to run faster. And he told that coach, no, those aren't the events I participate in. I am a sprinter. And that's what he did. And he ended up qualifying for the
Wow.
state track meet. He had the fastest qualifying time going into the state track meet for the 400-meter sprint. And he placed
Wow.
fourth in the state of Kentucky his senior year. And as I said in the previous interview somewhere, I have a video and of him running that event. And all you can hear, there's thousands of people at this track meet, and all you can hear is my big loud mouth cheering. But Kim is right. He was a fighter.
Yeah.
I think I would just like to end on that note that those who are listening, I mean, I thank you so much for giving us a glimpse of your delightful son. And I would like the people being left knowing that your son was a fighter. I mean, just the story that you just said of this kid. And he's like, no, this is who I am. And he goes out and he proves it. And let us remember Trent, and let us be fighters like that. Like, let us be out there saying, no, this is the truth, and it's going to be told. And we can have the light of Trent's life that's shining still. That's shining. And that's why it's so important, you might get sick of doing interviews, but I would encourage you, anytime somebody asks you to do an interview, let Trent's light shine. Let the world see the fighter that he was, and let us be encouraged by being a fighter, by being fighters too. So unless you have anything else you'd like to add,
the only thing I'd have one thing to end with, and that is, I had mentioned earlier that in 2 weeks, it'll be 1 year since Trent passed away. And we are all flying into Ohio State because he was a big Ohio State and Bengals fan. He was born in Ohio. And we bought a tree with a plaque, and they're going to plant it in the Ohio State Arboretum with all of our family there to honor him. And they'll take care of it for the life of the tree. And so we're really feeling really looking forward to that special time, to come together and remember Trent and honor Trent at this year, at his first year.
Oh my goodness, that is so wonderful. I mean, just that you will have that opportunity. And for any of us, I don't know, maybe you can post where that is. So if any of us are ever find ourselves in that location, we can just go see our fighter. So
be happy to. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, please let us know. Oh, is there any way that people can contact? Are you okay with people contacting you? And if there is, I mean, I can put all of this in the show notes. If you have emails or any other way, or, if you're on social media at all, I can put all that in the show notes. Because, you, as wounded as you are, you still have the ability to obviously help others. I mean, you're further ahead than some people are, and your words, just the way you've spoken about him and, the things that have happened in your family. I just want you to know we're all rooting for you. And if there's anything React 19 can do for you, just reach out. We'll be there. And we all just know, we know how to fight, right? We're going to get on that track. We're going to get on that track, and we're going to keep running. So thank you all so much. So appreciate you sharing your story.
We appreciate you. Thanks for the opportunity.
In describing Trent, he's a very kind, loyal, hardworking, joyful, sweet soul. He was so easy to raise. He was such a good, sweet child, and continued. He He was a yes, sir, yes, ma'am kind of kid. And not because we required that. That's just the kind of kid he was.
I would add that he was also very mature in his ability to relate, even as a very young man.
He's such a fighter. You know, he has a really strong spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I really admired that about him, you know, because just because he wasn't naturally talented at something didn't deter him from going for it if he wanted it.
He was a fighter. I just miss him. Never miss an opportunity. Never miss an opportunity to tell somebody you love them. Never miss an opportunity to laugh with them if you can. Be thankful for what's there. Be thankful for the opportunity to be, to have children, to love your children. Remember that the 24 years we had with them, which is why it's so important to not miss an opportunity. You don't know how much time you have.